Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Nellie Davis, and I'm the Director of Member Services at the Data Coalition, an initiative of the Data Foundation. Welcome to our webinar on the talent pipeline for data science and government with DLT Solutions and in partnership with Pluralsight. Thank you for joining us. Due to the size of the audience, everyone is on mute. However, we encourage you to engage with the discussion by submitting your questions in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. You can also engage with us on social media using the hashtag #DataLive. The Data Coalition has supported various efforts to ensure that data reported to, collected by, and used across government are reliable, high quality, and trustworthy. And what might have been otherwise assumed is worth saying, that the federal government also needs qualified and trained people to work with that data, hence our topic of today's discussion. This event joins a wider and growing conversation about federal workforce readiness that can remain competitive as innovative and emerging technologies rapidly evolve. There are efforts currently in play for replicable and dynamic data science talent pipelines and many more recommendations that are on the deck. The Data Coalition advocates for common sense steps like the establishment of a data science occupational series, which would help align talent with specific professional needs within agencies. Another action that we've seen is this past January, the OPM worked with a few agencies to pilot data science job series for a handful of openings and received a strong response, maxing out the resume threshold in just a few days. Government agencies want and need to recruit data professionals, but may not always have the right tools to effectively gather that talent. Other steps we've seen, the Biden administration proposed changes to federal hiring and recruiting processes in the FY22 budget proposal that would expand funding for talent teams, who would then supplement the efforts of hiring managers with staff to make data-informed decisions. Additionally, the Data Security Commission on AI noted in their final report that investments in K-12 and post-secondary education and retaining global talent should expand for long-term preparedness, but that takes time. A more near-term recommendation included ways to scale up digital talent in government by adapting existing structures to establish a U.S. Digital Academy and consider the viability of a national digital reserve corps. Now, there's no silver bullet for a quick solution, and we do not have yet a way to bend time. So the steady march towards useful solutions remains as essential as ever. And as the panel will discuss today, their practical efforts are helping to match needs and data professionals across government and lay the framework for a reliable data science talent pipeline. And for that discussion, I'll turn over to our panel moderator, Dr. Sherry Bennett, Chief Data Scientist at DLT Solutions. Sherry, when you're ready.
Hey there, I was waiting for somebody else to pop me up. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ashley, and we've got quite a panel today. Joining me is Dr. Sharon Boivin, who serves as the Deputy Chief Data Officer for the Department of Education. Dr. Philip Bourne, the Founding Dean at the University of Virginia School of Data Science. Dr. Doug Harris, the VP and Dean of the School of Cybersecurity and Information Technology at the University of Maryland's Global Campus, and Jordan Morrow, Head of Data Design and Management Skills at Pluralsight. Quick reminder to the audience, please do send us your questions. In the lower right-hand corner of the screen is the chat box. Please put them in there. Panelists, thank you for joining today. Let's start by having each of you tell us a little bit about your role within your organization and how the work you do relates to the use and development of data science skills and more generally a pipeline of talent. Sharon, let's start with you.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, Sherry, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here today with my fellow panelists and our viewers. I currently serve our nation's learners and educators as the Deputy Chief Data Officer for Analytics in the U.S. Department of Education. So the Ed Office of the Chief Data Officer was established just under 2 years ago in response to the Evidence Act. And in the OCDO, we work across Ed to solve challenges in data governance, information collection, infrastructure, analytics, and data access, including, of course, open data. It's also important for you to know that all across Ed, not just in the OCDO, data professionals and general staff need to interact with and talk about data every day as they monitor grants, analyze performance measures, distribute student financial aid, and plan for future budget and workforce needs. Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Sherry. I'm the founding dean of a school of data science. Nothing like founding a, well, my daughter's FaceTiming me, that's not good. There's nothing like founding a school during a pandemic. As you can imagine, as you know from your own experiences, a school is a major element of the hierarchy of a university. In fact, in our case, it was only the 12th time in a 200-year history that a school had been formed. We call ourselves, we're trying to live up to the name, a school without walls, where we're trying to infuse data science practices and skills across all of imaginable disciplines and domains, everything from religious studies to biomedicine. So it's quite a challenge. We have a series of programs, and perhaps I'll get to tell you a little more about those educational programs as we go along. But pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug?
Hi, thanks, Sherry, and thanks to the Data Coalition for hosting the event. I am Doug Harrison. I'm the Vice President and Dean of the School of Cybersecurity and Information Technology at UMGC, University of Maryland Global Campus. UMGC is the open access and global provider of online education for working adults and for military affiliated students around the world. The School of Cyber and IT is the largest educator in these sectors and the largest educator of minority students in these fields, with the total population in the school of right around 15,000 students. Our focus is on career relevant education that aligns directly with the emerging demands in information technology, computer science, and data science. We already do have a popular master's degree in data science, and in the spring we're launching a bachelor's degree in data science and a certificate in business analytics. And our graduate student data competition team is a repeated winner in BDA international competition. So we're proud of that as well.
Nice. I did not know that. Jordan?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here. So my name is Jordan Morrow. I am the head of data and design management skills for Pluralsight. My career, though, is, we like to joke, on just being a big nerd. I helped create and found the world's first data literacy program. My nickname in the industry is the godfather of data literacy, being the first to really start speaking about it and doing things about it. And that was about 7-8 years ago. My role is taking me, I've worked with Sharon in the past last year and a lot of federal programs. I'm working with the U.S. Army currently in different groups to help design data literacy strategies to empower not just from the technical, but all the way down to end users on how to use data more. So heavily involved strategically from the private and public sector, just the learning and empowerment strategies for people in data.
Excellent, thank you. For quite some time, we've heard about the challenges of retaining talent and now the acute need to attract data scientists to the federal government. Philip, prior to your experience at UVA, you served as NIH's Chief Data Officer. Can you speak to some of the challenges that you experienced in managing a pipeline of talent to develop not only the data infrastructure, but also the data science resources needed to support the agency's mission?
Yeah, I can have a go at that. It's a big job, needless to say. Trying to essentially establish data science across 27 institutes and centers that operate in a somewhat independent way, for those who know how the NIH works. But I think the difficulty in hiring and retaining is, I think, an issue that still plagues us, whatever our vertical that we happen to be in. And certainly, I think it's a particular issue for government in the sense of trying to be competitive in this marketplace. If you're trying to hire high-ranking individuals to sort of lead data science initiatives within government, you've got to use a mechanism like Title 42. It's just, there's no way you can be competitive otherwise. And then I think, having been someone who never worked in the government, but had been involved with the government through grants, suddenly entering government as a senior level is really and expected to make significant inroads into data science training. And I think shadowing is something that's really needed. It's quite a cultural shift when you move to government. And I think having I was very fortunate to have folks that really guided me along. For the younger folks who you're trying to get to enter the field or enter government as freshly minted data scientists, I think you really need to be you need to have the appropriate career paths lined up and laid out. And that's not, I think, necessarily very clear. And I think the notion of, I think government needs to do a better job at outreach to indicate what the value proposition is in government, because there's no doubt there is one. And but it's not necessarily clear. I mean, I discovered a whole slew of 3-letter agencies I'd never heard of before. And so, you know, trying to get people to go and enter into those fields where they don't even know what the organization does is problematic. So I think there's a lot of better outreach that could be done there. We also, sorry, I won't go on too long, but we didn't have enough in-house training. And I think that needs to come from the top of the organization and permeate throughout the organization to set up the in-house training that's needed. And I'd say that ranges across essentially everyone having some level of data literacy training if they don't have it already, all the way up to, you know, more in-depth data science skills. And that includes training the trainers. I think that's really to perpetuate the system. I think that's really important. And I think you've got to, it sort of goes with outreach, but you've got to also go out there. And I would say almost some of this starts with K-12. You really need to, you know, make students aware at a young age of what the prospects are. And I think there are lots of advantages for being in government in doing that. And then the last thing I'll say about training is just we need more internship programs, and we need a bi-directional. I mean, bringing students to work in government for, say, the summer or for short periods gives them a bird's eye view of what goes on. They take that back, they tell their friends, it starts to perpetuate. And there's different types of mechanisms with higher ed to really do that. Capstones is a good example. One of the problems is that, at least we had at NIH, was this sense that we can't just work with a subset of organizations, we've got to work with everybody. And then setting up a program with everybody just never happens. So you end up not getting to the point where you want to be. And I feel like I've taken a lot of time already. Let me just say one thing about infrastructure. What became very important while I was at NIH was the notion of fair practices when it comes to data. And find access, interoperate, and reuse. And also the notion of the data commons as an entity from which infrastructure from which to build. And how to build across the organization. And we can say more about that as time, but I don't want to overstate the time for others. So thanks.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. It's interesting to hear you talk about the need for technical training in-house. And many of these, especially NIH, you've got a lot of doctors and PhDs who come right out of graduate school. Into that environment. So the notion that, there's still additional training that may be needed across the board is really an important point, I think, especially around literacy. Oh, go ahead.
If I may put my foot in my mouth, I'll say that the issue is not that, I mean, I think there's a reasonable job is done at folks who come out of graduate school having some training in the case of information, biomedical data sciences. That's going okay. Frankly, where training is needed is the more senior folks who didn't grow up in this era of digital transformation. And it's not in their blood, and yet it's such a critical part of the future of their organizations.
Yeah.
So, there's a mismatch there.
Yeah. Many, all the agencies, we wouldn't consider them digital natives per se. The agencies themselves and how they got started, like many private companies, that the product itself is sort of the digital process, right? And so is the information and data. So interesting points. Thank you. Sharon, as the Deputy CDO, your experiences in the Department of Education, could you talk a little bit about what your hiring and recruiting processes are? You guys seem to be very successful, touted as one of the agencies who's led the charge, certainly. And if you could also talk a little bit about, for existing staff who may not be technical, what are some of the things that you're doing, strategies, techniques that you're imparting to get them up to speed?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Sherry. Great question. And Phil, your comments lead right into mine. So as a new office, the Ed OCDO had to staff up fairly quickly. We had to recruit and hire data scientists and other professionals to meet our obligations under the Evidence Act and under the federal data strategy. At the same time, we did need to begin to assess the data workforce staffing and professional development needs that were happening in our offices. So in my office, we've recently hired several master's and PhD level data scientists under OPM's 1530 series, which is the statistician series, some right out of grad school and others with years of industry experience. And we've gotten smarter about what we ask for in vacancy announcements. We now specify technical skills in the required specialized experience statements, and we've started asking for a code sample from each applicant. And what that does is it keeps people who don't have code samples from applying, which is a very good thing. We hire to build a strong team, not to find that unicorn data scientist who can do everything. Our data analytics team has folks who prefer coding in Python, Stata, SAS, and R, and who visualize using Tableau, Power BI, R Shiny, and Excel. We are also looking for domain knowledge and a strong foundation in my own field of statistics. And we need to get smarter about communicating our hiring opportunities to more audiences, including by developing university partnerships. So Phil and Doug, I'm going to be in touch. And I also encourage everyone to follow the Ed Office of the Chief Data Officer on LinkedIn. We highlight hiring in both our own office and in CDO shops across the government. So one of the 4 goals in our new Ed Data Strategy, you can Google that, by the way, Ed Data Strategy, is all about building human capacity to leverage data effectively for decision making. This goal, goal 2, includes workforce planning to fill both short and long-term staffing needs. It includes our recently launched data literacy program for all staff and our new emerging program for Ed data professionals, which includes a community of practice and professional development tailored to staff needs and data-related competencies. So we're currently developing our first data-focused workforce plan to help us advance our maturity. We're supporting Ed offices by creating standard position descriptions for data professionals, including career ladders for data scientists. And we're doing it in a way so that we can leverage those government-wide opportunities like the one for data scientists that was used last year. But at the same time, we're really laser focused on supporting the professional development needs of all Ed staff, both the need for general staff to learn to speak data and the need for data professionals to grow and learn. So as I said, we recently launched our agency-wide data literacy program developed with support from Val Logan at the Data Lodge, and we're currently rolling out our new data professionals community of practice. Our data professionals training curriculum will include learning pathways, short topics, presentations, a mentoring program, and we're also creating career paths and competencies associated with those career paths. So data professionals can see possibilities for growth within the agency in a path that focuses on data analytics or data architecture, and they can see what the competencies are that we expect them to have at a GS9, at a GS13, or at a GS15 in those kinds of roles. And finally, OCDO is sponsoring a set of rotational assignments so that Ed staff can come into our shop, learn about our work, and return to their home office with new skills and a better understanding of Ed data policies and priorities. And to Phil's point, don't forget to bring along the executives. To be a leader of smart people, I had to get smarter. So I came over to OCDO after spending most of my career in the National Center for Education Statistics as a data analyst and survey methodologist. 2 years ago, I didn't understand why Python was such a big deal, or the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse. I learn from my team every day, and that's one reason I love my job. Thank you.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of the activities that you're doing really go beyond, some of the action items on the federal data strategy, and that's really great. Do you share a lot of these tactics and strategies at the council meetings that are hosted on a monthly basis?
Well, yes, absolutely. Our CDO, Gregory Fertelny, attends the CDO council meetings. And as our data literacy program is evolving, we're sharing information about that. Also, our new data professionals training curriculum, we're developing competency maps and career maps that we hope, won't only be useful for within ed, but perhaps can be models for other agencies.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Leverage away. That's best practice and helps accelerate everybody's experience if they haven't gotten started. Let's see, Jordan, thinking about Pluralsight and the great work you guys do, one risk mitigation strategy in terms of, if there's a gap and new students coming out of college and hiring brand new professionals in the workforce is to actually reskill and focus on talent that's already within your organization. This can be a little difficult because people have different interests. They have different types of educational backgrounds, and depending on what their job is, they may have more or less need for doing analysis per se. I think we all agree that everybody needs to be data literate and be able to read data tables and ask some inquisitive questions, be able to, understand the context of how the methods of information presented, but not everybody needs to be able to crank out a regression or merge 5 different petabytes of, files of data and that sort of thing. One of the things that you talk about a lot is the need for organizations to, tailor ready in a way what's right for their organization through the use of assessments and something you call learning strategies, I believe. Can you talk in a little more detail about what you mean by assessments and the use of these learning strategies and some experiences that you've had? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The way you're speaking about it is exactly how I do. The reality is not every organization is the same. From the public sector, federal organizations, whether it's military, a department of something and anything, to the private sector, working in many different industries and regions, et cetera, it's not a one size fits all. And so a lot of times organizations, they know, Philip brought this up earlier, education right now is doing a really good job. We're seeing more data science, data and analytics. The Department of Education is doing an awesome job bringing things on board. But the majority of people are in their jobs right now. And we're living in a digital economy. And the way Philip said it, the way I've said it is, most are not born and bred in that digital economy. But it doesn't mean everybody needs to be technical. And so when I get to organizations, we design holistic data literacy learning strategies, all the way from an end user who might not need any technical skills whatsoever. They just need to know how to interpret and understand and communicate with data, to an executive who just has a quick response when it comes to data, to the most advanced technical person who they have the technical skills, so let's train them how to communicate more effectively with data to the audience. All of this boils down into what you described as the learning strategy. When I build that with organizations, I usually start off, or the way that I like to frame it is I'm trying to find out, what are you just trying to do with your data, right? Organizations around the world, they know they need data. They know that they have data. They don't know what they're doing with it. The majority of them don't know exactly what their strategy is. And I tie my learning strategy to a data strategy directly with the business strategy. What is your business trying to do? Data should support that.
Absolutely.
So once we get that strategy in place, I like assessments because we need to know where people stand at that given time. Not everybody has the same skill set. Not everyone. Data is massive, from ethics to governance to engineering, analyst, visualization, all of these different areas. Where do you work? What skills do you need? So we're going to assess you. 10, 20 questions can give us a good benchmark of where you are, allowing us to then say, okay, this is where you fall. This is a learning path for you, all encompassed in that big learning strategy. And then in the end, all of that should drive the culture of the organization to utilize data as a tool to enable them in their jobs, which is what it should be doing. So it's, I mean, that's a big, massive project and work that goes into a very short answer, but that's how we design it. That's where I spend the majority of my time. In fact, this afternoon, that's what I'm working on when we're done here eventually, is I have to continue to build out a strategy for one of the largest airline manufacturers in the world, because that's what's happening. This is what's occurring, and they're jumping in. I think COVID kind of sped them up to figure out that they needed to do this.
Yeah, excellent points. You know, as you talk about, a lot of this will entail working closely with leadership and communication and top down and getting alignment, you know, all the way down to the bottom. And we've talked about this before, you know, that's a real cultural shift. And even the federal data strategy talks a lot about the important role of creating a data-driven culture. Can you speak a little bit about how this process and some experience, some use cases that you've had with seeing that culture shift as you begin some of this work?
Oh, absolutely. One of the best examples is I had the opportunity to help the United Nations take a look at their data strategy itself and dive in to understand what is it they're doing. And they were going about it from the data side, and I was brought in and I started talking about the people side. And you start to see people buying in. Now, the first thing that was occurring, and this happens across the board, public and private sector, is you do need leadership to buy in. It's been mentioned. You need executives to buy in. You need whoever is heading up different groups to buy in. And the reason is, how often are you going to get a project to take off and to fly if leadership doesn't agree with it? So one of the things that I do is I'll meet with executives and leadership at organizations to help their mindset to shift. At the same time, we drive it at the grassroots level, right? As some people ask, where do you start this? Some of the companies I work with, one organization, it's a federal one I'm working with right now, has over 1 million employees in it. Over 1 million. So where do you start this? We're pinpointing it at where it's enthusiastic. Where can we create that grassroots movement and combine it with the leadership? So when you combine those two things together, the shift in the culture can be more successful. Like, people ask me, what's the #1 roadblock for data and analytical success? I tell them very quickly, it has nothing to do with your data quality, data engineering, data technology. It's, does your organization have a culture that will buy into this? And we start to see it. And then when it happens, like one prime example, there's a public company in Arizona I was working with whose leadership was all in. And we started to work on a program with them, and you started to see people understand. The moment you take out this thought process that everyone needs to be technical with data, and you help the majority of people understand you don't have to be technical, we're just going to give you skills to ask questions, to communicate, they start to understand that it's not taking over their job. They don't have to do massive amounts of schooling to reskill themselves. The culture starts to shift. The other thing that I like to tell people is I use an example of building a house. You're given many tools to build a house. The same thing with your career. Microsoft Outlook is a tool. Using GoToMeeting for this webinar today is a tool. Data is another tool. So can we give you some skills that will give you that tool to help you be successful? When you do that, it eliminates the fear and intimidation that statistics and data can have with people, because 99% of people aren't going to use those skills. And so that's how that culture starts to buy in. It starts to drive, because they start to understand it is a holistic strategy and puzzle.
Yeah, excellent points. I want to change the conversation just a little bit to talk about how could or should universities and educational institutions in general and the federal government, state and local too, right, could collaborate to build a talent pipeline. I'm going to start with Doug, because UMUGC is well known for partnering with government entities to develop talent pipelines and programs and high demand workforce areas like cybersecurity. So Doug, if you could talk a little bit about the development of UMGC's cyber program and how the lessons learned and that experience were leveraged to develop the 4-year degree program for data science that is going to launch in 2022.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and we're really excited to be getting into the game at this level as well. The maturation and the growth process for cybersecurity both as a field and as a field of study, so practice and education, I think really does have a lot to tell us about how to build workforce of the future for data science, and some of the pitfalls actually to try to avoid. UMGC's cyber programs were one of the first at-scale full array cyber offerings when they launched just about a little over 10 years ago. And our decision to make that investment emerged from longstanding partnerships with the Department of Defense and educating U.S. military affiliated students around the world. And what we heard from them at the time was what we also heard from our faculty around the globe in the existing information technology and computer science programs we have. And these are, I should note that faculty are all experts in or working in the fields that they're teaching in for us. All of the signals we got from all of these stakeholders came in loud and clear that there was a rapidly emerging need for cyber education. And, so we are, and that was a big motivator for us to be responsive to the students that we serve and the markets that we're aligned to. We're really proud now to be the largest provider of cyber education in the US. And one reason I think for that success is that we built those programs in direct collaboration with employers in a way where we didn't just, so the old model is kind of convenient advisory board and I'll buy them lunch for the day and we'll listen and my people will sort of take some notes and we'll all have a good time. And then we go back and translate that into what we think we heard they needed. And a lot gets lost in that translation process. And I think that accounts a lot for the frustration and the gap between what we think we're doing in higher ed and often what employers experience when our graduates end up on the job. And so the way we have found to work with our cyber programs, I'll talk a bit about that with data too, is to really sit down with employers and elicit from them what it is that they need and translate that down to the knowledge, skill, ability, disposition level that translates into competencies, that aligns to real world assessments, that translates into teaching and learning activities. And that's how we developed our cyber programs, so that they had industry, government, the military were all at the table with us continuously. It wasn't just a one and done kind of thing. So if you fast forward, 11 years now to today, one reason we're launching the data science program is that the employers and that we work closely with, the faculty who work in our programs in the master's degree in data analytics told us the same thing that we heard a decade ago in the cyber sector, and the same thing that the BLS and Burning Glass and MC Data, though I guess I should just call them Burning Glass now that they merged, that all tell us the same thing, right? That what you all know to be the case, data science, job growth off the charts, its growth velocity is accelerating. And just as in cyber, you can't respond to that scale simply by reskilling people trained and working in the adjacent technology sectors, right? There aren't enough of them for one, and that also depletes another critical workforce pipeline to fill another. The other dimension, last thing I want to say about this, the other dimension of that problem is also an opportunity, and that's intentionally working to bring students into the data science pipeline who are not already technologists of some sort. And that's really important thing to not just grow, but diversify the pipeline. And honestly, I really think it's better to talk about it in terms of pathways, because it's authentically diversifying the workforce that helps supply the fix the supply problem by increasing the total number of data scientists, so that we're not just trying to squeeze more people out of the same strata of the population that historically pursues technology careers, right? We know that there are race, class, socioeconomic, geographic binders and determiners on that. What we're doing when we're diversifying the pipeline is actually bringing people from more diverse backgrounds into the field. And to put this in concrete terms, UMGC was just named the largest producer of minority students in computer science and information technology in graduate studies. So I'm not saying that to be the fluff file, but the point is that in the most recent reporting year, we graduated about 800 students in these fields. The next closest producer, 186. So I don't say that to be self-congratulatory, because there's nothing to be congratulated about here, right? This is a problem that our numbers are even just barely a drop in the ocean of the problem. So the issue is diversifying the workforce. It's especially critical for the public sector. The problems that government's trying to solve and the impact that a government workforce can have on the economy and on the society, all of this has to come from a workforce that reflects the diversity of the communities that we serve. And we learned this in cyber, where implicit bias creeps into the inclusion criteria for threat spectrum analysis, right? And that's just to take one example. Data models and analytic frameworks are subject to the same pitfalls. The good news, though, is that because we're still relatively on the ground floor of this this effort, we can build a commitment to diversifying the pipeline in the DNA of data science education. And we can do that, I think, in a way that will build a stronger and more thriving data workforce.
That's excellent. Philip, if you could talk a little bit about, Doug mentioned their curriculum in partnership, not only with folks in government, but also private industry. And as you founded the School of Data Science at UVA, can you talk a little bit about the influence that private industry had in that with you since its formation, and how it's evolved over the last couple of years in building a talent pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doug's made a very good point about creating this relationship between those who are hiring the people we train and those who are also training them. It's ridiculous that we don't actually have a better interface in some ways. The way we approached it is we have an advisory board of private sector experts, including the CIO of Capital One, the president and CEO of Verisk Analytics, and so on. All fantastic people. Some of them are graduates of UVA. But they give their time, in these positions, but they give their time in droves, and it's just fantastic what we've accomplished together. And so, as we're building a new building to support our data science, we're going to have a corporate commons. And so the idea is to create the pipeline directly, well, physically within our organization, so that in terms of research and training, that they're there on site. And I would love to see that as well with the government sector. In fact, this has got me thinking that we really need to have that relationship, whether it's a separate group of government official folks, but it would be great to have that, whether they join the group we already have. So I think that's really important. Just to say something about the curriculum. We started off with a master's program, as I think many of these initiatives, there's hundreds of them around the country now, have done, because it's a relatively short program, typically with people who already got some level of being in the workforce, got some level of training, and are either retraining themselves for this or really trying to build their skill set. And that we can't turn them out fast enough. The rate determining step for us is hiring enough good faculty to teach these folks. We're just actually waiting for our state body to approve a PhD program in data science. If you think about what a PhD program in data science actually is, that's an hour-long discussion in itself, and you wouldn't get anywhere. When you're graduating people who might be doing data science as it relates to architecture versus, as I said before, religious studies and so on, how do you create that within one program? It's quite challenging. But there's a question, I think, for both government and private sector as to the skill need of people with that level of research that you have when you come out of a PhD versus a master's program. A master's program where we absolutely emphasize the practical aspects of what students do. In fact, we also now have a minor, and we're also working on a 4-year undergraduate degree. The minor is swamped. We wouldn't get to the state of Data 8 at Berkeley, where they have over 1,000 students sitting in doing the introductory data science course, but we could have a lot of students. And so how we manage all of that and how we deal with it is something. And I'd like to just make one point. It's a bit ironic that I'm actually on this panel because I left government to do data science back in academia. And when I was looking around, in fact, where to do that, what attracted me to the opportunity that I have was that it was not wedded. The data science initiative, which was initially an institute and a school, was not wedded to and tied directly to any other entity, whether it be, for example, an engineering school, information school, or it was part of statistics or applied math. It was actually standalone. And that actually enabled us to really operate independently and across the whole campus. So the greatest excitement of all is seeing training our students to actually use data from disparate areas that would never have happened otherwise because of the silos that exist in academia. And suddenly we've got students bringing together data from things as disparate as electronic health records and crash data from DMV. And I don't have time to go into the incredible stuff that happens when you do that sort of thing. But it's just really exciting. And I think that trains students well for what they need to do going forward.
Absolutely. Your analogy, the description of it as a school without walls, I mean, it's essentially what every organization who's trying to actually do this tough work needs to do. The silos need to break down, the walls need to break down, and people need to think creatively about how to leverage data across the entire organization. That requires thinking about, breaking down the processes, reinventing them. People who are very territorial about their transaction system and the data that is in it, they need to share, right? And they need to think creatively. And I get a lot of questions about people asking me, hey, my daughter's a civil engineer and she hates it, but she's heard about this, data science stuff, and what should she do? And of course, now I'm going to tell them UMGC if you want to, you can't get to a new university fast enough, UVA. But outside of that, I think organizations need to think about how you can take a degree like that, go into an organization and start doing data science type work. This is such a great topic and time is flying. I want to encourage people to submit their questions. It looks like we've got a few, and I'm going to start taking those in a few minutes. Sharon had a great idea to do some lightning round questions. So while I'm waiting for people to drop some more questions in the chat box, I'm going to do a lightning round. And hopefully this will stimulate some questions as well. And just ask each of you very quickly, just 1 or 2 words to answer the following. So with regards to attracting technical talent, what are 2 advantages that the public sector actually has over the private sector that you can state out here to all the folks who are in college right now? We've got a lot of graduate students also registered, recruiters who need some help. What are the 2 things the public sector has over the private sector? And Jordan, I'm going to start with you.
Oh man, I would say access to resources. When you look at the public sector and the way the investment is happening from the top on down in different agencies, I find that the resources and the desire is there to really upskill and hire talent that can help for the future of these things. The other side of it is when you look at like Sharon's organization and you look at some of the initiatives being put on by some of the other federal organizations, I'm excited by them. I think that is a step ahead. A lot of private sector, to put it bluntly, is pretty messed up right now when it comes to data. And so I think that this gives an advantage when you're looking for roles and things like that.
Okay, Doug?
Public service mission.
One more.
No, I'm going to be accountable because I'm going to say more than one thing when you ask me another question.
Oh, okay. Sharon?
Well, you stole my first one, Doug, but my second one is really being on the ground floor of a paradigm shift in how the federal government is using data for decision making due to the Evidence Act and the Federal Data Strategy. It's an exciting place to be right now. You won't get rich, but you work with great, smart people, and you'll have a lot of exciting projects to work on and have a very important mission that serves the public good.
Phil?
Well, I can't help but say again, public good, because I think that is such a huge thing. I'm not copying out. The other one I'd say is sustainability. And, public service can be a career for life in ways that doesn't always happen when you're in different types of private sector situations. If the government goes, well, there's nothing left. So the chances are it's going to be around, and it's an opportunity to grow within a single organization.
Okay, second question. This is for all the government leaders and CEOs of organizations in the public sector that are listening right now. What are the 2 biggest impediments to filling the technical talent gap in the public sector? And I'll start with Philip this time. two impediments, roadblocks?
Yeah, well, I think, frankly, competitiveness in terms of, if you're talking about government versus private sector, it's just in terms of its competitiveness, financial competitiveness.
Okay.
That's up to top. That's the only one I have right now.
Okay, resources, more generally. Okay, Doug?
So two things. I'll leave some of my real estate I didn't use before. One is insufficient healthy risk-taking in hiring decisions across technical fields. There's a desire to solve the workforce problem, but then when the hiring manager is looking at what's coming through the talent acquisition pipeline, they're looking for skills plus experience. And that's, you need to have an organization that has the kinds of approaches that Jordan and Pluralsight can support to complement the earn while learning that they can do in formal education. It can't be either or it's got to be both and, so that you can widen the pool that you have available. And this won't surprise you now that you heard my homily before, but the second one is the lack of inclusive and equitable technology education on my side of the fence that isn't culturally responsive to students from marginalized and underserved populations. And the status quo education is just leaving them behind. And so that's narrowing the pool of what we are graduating into the employee world.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sharon?
So I'm just going to give one. I think in this, to me, the biggest impediment is the fact that there are students of many ages, colors, and gender identities who have learned that they're not good at or they don't like math.
Jordan?
Yeah, the one that I see that I hasn't been mentioned yet is, like, coming from me being a hiring leader, and I would do this in a federal agency too, is we have to make sure that we're combining the technical skills of data science, statistics, math, all of that with the soft skills. When I see a lot of candidates coming out right now, like I get asked to mentor a lot at the college age, whether it's an undergrad or a graduate program, and they'll come to me and they'll say, Jordan, what skills should I be studying? What classes in statistics? I said, you're majoring in that. You don't need my help there. We're going to go take these electives on communication, on business planning, on all of these things that are fundamental skills that are lost at times. That's a part of every strategy I build, is you have to have soft skills to combine with technical skills to be the most valuable employee you can.
Yeah, excellent point. And is a little related to the first audience question, which is advertised as a two-part question. So the first is, as a senior manager, I observe that it's often the IT staff who are eager to learn data vis-a-vis data science, but they often lack the subject matter expertise to apply those skills optimally. Conversely, non-technical analysts tend to see data visualization software as IT and can be intimidated when asked to learn it. What are suggestions for bridging these gaps? Sharon, please jump in.
So I think that's one of the reasons that the Evidence Act saw the CDO as being an independent office within federal agencies, or at least an office that could collaborate very effectively with the CIO's office. Because what happens is that the data people know the data, but they may worry about the IT, and the IT people know the IT, but they don't know the data. And everybody needs domain experience. If we don't know elementary and secondary education, we aren't going to be able to understand and use data that is generated out of elementary and secondary education. So I think it's really important that we have a shared partnership approach to data analysis, data architecture, data science, data visualization, and data release. It includes all the people who need to be involved, including the privacy and confidentiality people in the federal sector.
Absolutely agree. Philip, did you have a point? Philip, it looked like you raised your hand earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's a critical question that was raised, and I think one way of addressing it is appropriate mentorship of students in the training programs, such that they have access not just to the core data science expertise, but also the chosen vertical that they happen to be working in or choose to work in, and get that joint training before they leave. I mean, this is not a new problem. It's something that plagues, for example, what I was involved in, still am started many years ago, is the notion of computation as it relates to biology and the life sciences. And the way that evolved, I think, most successfully was having training programs that had dual mentorship that actually trained people across those interfaces. And then the next generation has both digital skills and skills within the domain. Otherwise, you just continue this pathway of separation and I think data science is really geared towards breaking down that barrier.
Yep. Second part to this is I'm one of those senior managers who missed this boat, but now oversee contracts where data science is a focus and lead data vis-a-vis staff. I'd love to hear more about learning paths geared towards training managers who need to be able to help select technology and differentiate packages and approaches in this field. Please, Jordan.
That goes right along with what I do. So the way that I look at it is when we think about data literacy, there's many facets, right? You have analytical work, statistical work, data science, AI, and all these things. One of the paths when I work with organizations deals directly with leadership. How do you train managers, senior managers, directors, all the way up to executives to lead data initiatives and data charges that go through an organization? In some cases, to your point, it's what tool do we select? How do we hire the right people? What kind of approaches do we take? So when I build these out for organizations, one, it does come back to the data learning strategy that we put in place. So when you put it in place, the assessments come into play here, all of it comes into play, so that when we build the strategy for leadership, we know where the skills reside. And to this senior manager's point of missing the boat, that's fine, that's not an issue. There are certain things we tackle, there are certain things we look at. Can we teach you about the tools and what they are capable of? Can we teach you basic data foundations so that you're comfortable with communicating around data? Can we teach you the skill sets that reside within hiring practices? So you're not like one organization that I've worked with where they hired about 250 data scientists, one for each business unit. They're not doing a whole lot because they don't know what to do with them. They just knew they needed them. So can we train executives and leaders on how do you hire appropriately and why in the world are you even hiring that person? So absolutely, those strategies are there, those paths are there. You can connect with me. I'm happy to go into more detail. I know we only have a couple minutes here, but that same approach goes from technical skills, non-technical skills, learning about tools, all of that.
And Sherry, I'll just add that our annual all-staff survey on data skills that Jordan actually helped us develop, as you mentioned, is in 3 different pathways. So we have a pathway for executives, we have a pathway for general staff, and we have a pathway for data professionals, because we really do feel that there are certain data competencies that are essential for executives who are managing programs and need to understand how to use data effectively to do that.
That's great.
Say one quick thing from the higher ed perspective. I mean, I think we have an obligation to actually make our content available online, so that for lifelong training and also to support continuing executive education programs.
Yeah, that's a great idea. This one's for Sharon. Is the Department of Education publishing your data literacy strategy anywhere publicly?
We'll have to figure that out. Keep an eye on our OCDO LinkedIn page, and if we have anything to share about that, we will do it there.
Okay. Well, we're coming close to the end of the panel, and I'd like to give each of you just some time to give one final thought here. And you can say whatever you want, but if you could think about one, if you were king or queen for the day and you could do one thing that should be prioritized to help build this pipeline that we're talking about in data science, what would that be? And I'll start with Jordan.
I'm going to turn to one of my favorite phrases, and that is, and it goes a little bit against the last thing you said there, but the first one is not everyone needs to be a data scientist, but everyone needs to be developing these skills across every federal organization that exists. And to really spearhead and spark your data science journey, just become more curious. Don't worry about the statistics yet. Don't be doing this or that. ask a lot of questions. Question every data point that comes in front of you. I think all of us could sit here and say over the past year with COVID that a lot of things weren't questioned, and on any side of the political spectrum. And the reality is, when I teach people where to get started, I say, just ask questions. Then eventually you get into more technical, you find people who have the skills you need, but just ask a lot of questions.
Good point. Doug?
This is more about, I think, organizational culture that has a secondary and tertiary effect on the workforce pipeline, but it's to, I would magically eliminate the negative somatic response that people have when they see data about their unit that they think is going to imperil them because it's not going in the direction that they think it should be. And so,
Right.
then I would ask them to have Jordan's magic power, which is to start asking questions rather than trying to find reasons to not trust the data. I think that would really accelerate the pace of this cultural transformation, whether you're a data science implicated or not, primarily in your role, because it's not coming for all of us, but it's going to help all of us. And I think that's how we have the orientation we need toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets back to culture and leadership and what's the message coming from the top, for sure. Sharon?
So I have two. So first of all, we want and need all federal managers and senior leaders to really get on board with building the pipeline. At Ed, we're getting there. For several years now, we've really worked to make the connection between use of data and mission success. We really do believe in the benefits of data-driven decision-making, the ability to adapt and evolve quickly, and the need to reduce low-value work. So we want to help the management teams see how the data science pipeline can help us with those things. And then the second part is attracting the right talent. So we get that this is an incredibly competitive space and the federal government can't offer the salaries of the private sector. So we have to make a compelling case in the government to job candidates about the benefits of government service, and then follow through and make government a great place to work for data professionals.
Absolutely. And Philip, one last comment here?
Yeah, if you have the misfortune to see me, you'll realize I've been around academia for a long time. And I'd say what's going on now is unprecedented in my 40 years. And what that means is we're training lots of people to actually work within this sector, so really embrace and take advantage of it. But it also tells you that there's change like we've never seen before that's here, and it's going to come even more. So you can't bury your head in the sand, and this is here to stay, and it's just going to grow. So get involved.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to this great panel for your time and participation. And for you, those of you in the audience, thank you for joining us today. And Ashley, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Sherry, for moderating this discussion. And thank you, Sharon, Philip, Doug, and Jordan for participating. I'd also like to thank the audience for your attention and hope you're able to take away some actionable steps, whether you are coming at it from federal government perspective, state, local government, education, wherever you are, that within the litany of options through these final recommendations and the full discussion, that there are some steps that you can take to cut through the stack of solutions that are out there. Because as the panel said, it's here to stay. We've got to find ways to move forward together. There is movement towards change, and whether it's one step at a time or multi-pronged approach, stay engaged. So I'd like to thank Sherry and DLT Solutions for their sponsorship of this webinar and Pluralsight for their partnership, the panelists again for your participation, and to you, the audience, for tuning in. As this is an area that will continue to change, don't be shy about asking questions, and join us next time for another discussion. Have a good afternoon.